Herkese selamlar, saygılar.
Selam saygı bizden değerli hocam.
Burak'cığım nasılsın?
İyiyim abi, ne var ne yok, nasıl keyfin?
İyiyiz vallahi, uğraşıyoruz işte gördüğün gibi.
Senin için süslendim bak.
Çok şıksın.
Yusuf Beyciğim nasılsınız, iyi misiniz üstadım?
Mr. Coffee, you welcome.
Hello, merhaba.
Merhaba. That's great.
How are you?
Everything is okay, and you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, everything is okay.
Great.
Yusuf Bey hoş geldiniz.
No.
Open your microphone, please.
Bu mu?
We've been busy today. We're trying to put down a coup.
Yeah.
Maybe we can ask this coup to Mr. Birza. You know that he's the ex-ambassador in Azerbaijan for US. Then maybe he has some comment on.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Luke, I'm thinking that if Kanye throws a concert, this can all be solved.
Well, I think, yeah, perhaps.
You might
If
even
only-
save his marriage.
he wanted it paid for, remember?
That's true.
Yeah, so he wanted Armenia to pay for that concert, which is hilarious. I mean, so funny. It's embarrassing, really.
Very.
Burak sakalları biraz daha uzatırsan tamam o iş yani.
Hocam, now you just purchased a Harley Davidson, right?
Yeah.
If
Yes.
you're gonna ride a Harley, you have to stay like this. I'm telling you.
That's great.
Yani the other gentlemen here, if they are not riding a Harley Davidson, no problem. But you, me, we have to be like this. That's the
Yes,
style.
yes, that's true. Yes.
So is this starting at in a couple of minutes, right?
Yes, but we still wait Ali Çınar and Mr. Duran is now in the platform. Yeah.
Are we live right now? We're live, right?
This is live. Yeah.
Okay.
I take the Kanye joke back, everyone.
Mr. Duran, Michael Duran, can you hear us or not? Mr. Duran, you welcome. But please open the microphone. Ali hocam hoş geldiniz.
Hoş bulduk hocam.
Mr. Duran, your microphone is closed.
Oh, how about that?
You welcome.
You want everything. You want not just a picture, you want to hear my voice.
Mr. Birza, also you welcome.
Hey, good to be here. Nice to see you all. Wow. Luke. Ali, you lost a ton of weight. Yusuf looking manly as always. Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Ambassador.
Buraki's burly, and Michael, I can't wait to learn much more from you today. It's always.
I thought you were going to say, Mike, you're looking fatter, which is totally true.
Stand down. Stand up.
No. I won't do that to you. I have my COVID-19. Those are the extra 19 pounds I gained thanks to the pandemic.
19. Nice.
Sayın Başkanım burada mısınız? Buradaysanız başlatabilirim.
Evet, ben bütün arkadaşlarımıza hayırlı akşamlar diliyorum. Buradayım.
Müsaadenizle başlatıyorum.
Burak Bey, iyi akşamlar.
Nasılsınız değerli hocam?
Sağ olun, çok teşekkür ediyorum. Kutay Hocam, Yusuf Bey, Mr. Luke, Michael, hepinize good evening everybody. İyi akşamlar.
Okay, just let's begin then. Thanks everybody joining us for a very important event hosted by İstanbul Aydın University and Diplomatic Research Association. This is the webinar series third on the topic, the future of Turkish-American relations in the Biden era. You know that it is a very timely event if we think the difficulties of bilateral relations of two countries nowadays. Before we start to open up the panel to our distinguished guests, I would like to express my gratitude to the President, Mr. Mustafa Aydın, who provided us with these opportunities. I would like to thank the Diplomacy Research Association for their contribution to this organization, and all the participants, all of you, especially please Ali Çınar and Yusuf Erim, because they made great contributions to the creation of this webinar. The last thanks goes to our dear assistant Bilge Han. Really, he has made great efforts in every organization. Now, I want to introduce the president of Istanbul Aydın University, Associated Professor Mustafa Aydın, for opening comments before we open the floor to our distinguished panelists. Dear President, the floor is yours.
Çok teşekkür ediyorum Kutay Hocam. Thank you very much. Çok değerli konuşmacılarımız, değerli katılımcılarımız, değerli dinleyicilerimiz, hepinizi bu değerli bir etkinliğe katkılarınızdan dolayı İstanbul Aydın Üniversitesi Mütevelli Heyet Başkanı olarak saygıyla selamlıyorum.
I'd like to extend my gratitude, and I'm very thankful as the president of Istanbul Aydın University to all our valuable panelists, our participants being here with us today.
Covid-19 hepimizi bir tarafa savurdu aslında.
COVID-19 has just spread us all over the place actually during this time.
Bütün sektörler çok ciddi şekilde Covid'den etkilendiği gibi eğitim sektörü de bu etkilenenlerin başında geliyor.
As many other sectors that are affected by the COVID-19, education sector is also one of the first sectors that are affected by it.
Fakat hayat devam ediyor.
But life goes on.
Bu süreç içerisinde her sektör olduğu gibi eğitim de kendini buna göre yenilemeli, ayak uydurmalı ve değişim konusunda gerekli revizeleri yapmak zorundaydı.
Just as all the other sectors, education needed to just adapt and transform and just go along with the new forms of the COVID-19 era.
Bu çalışmaların başında eğitim öğretimle beraber üniversitelerimizin birçoğu hem sosyal hem kültürel hem ekonomik farklı alanlarda webinarlar düzenleyerek faaliyetlerini devam ettirdiler.
During this pandemic, many universities have started doing webinars such as this one to dabble on the social, cultural, and economic and other areas and talk about them.
Bunların bir kısmı ulusal, bir kısmı da uluslararası nitelikteydi, hüviyetteydiler.
Some of them were national and some of them were, of course, international.
Bu anlamda Kutay Hocamızın koordinatörlüğünde, önderliğinde üniversitemizde özellikle son dönemlerdeki siyasi olaylarda dikkate alarak birçok etkinlik, webinar düzenledi, uluslararası webinar düzenledi.
And in the leadership of Professor Kutay at our university, we have been, especially in the political topics, our university have been conducting international webinars, especially recently.
Bunların ilkini Doğu Akdeniz'de yaşanan güncel gelişmeleri ele alınan webinarıydı.
First one of the webinar was about the East Mediterranean problems that we were having.
İkincisi Çin'in kuşak ve yol projesiyle alakalı bir webinarıydı, uluslararası webinarıydı.
The second one was also an international webinar about the Chinese Silk Road.
Bugün de üçüncüsünü yapıyoruz. Biden dönemindeki Türkiye-Amerika ilişkilerinin geleceği konusundaki webinar.
And today, this is the third international webinar that we're going to discuss about now the Biden era and Turkish-American relations after that.
Ki bugünlerde en çok Türkiye'nin gündemini işgal eden bir konu tabii ki.
And this is a topic that is in our agenda nowadays in Turkey too.
Tabii buradaki değerli konuşmacılarımız, onlara ben bu konuda herhangi bir bilgiye aktarma durumunda değilim. Çünkü hepimiz de biliyoruz ki 18. yüzyılda deniz ticaretiyle başlayan Amerika-Türkiye ilişkileri zaman içerisinde çok farklı boyutlara ulaştı.
I'm not gonna just talk about it much in front of all you, but we all know that since 18th century with the marine trades, this has been a topic of discussion for centuries now.
Bu ilişkiler özellikle 2. Dünya Savaşı'ndan sonra NATO ile zirveye ulaştı diyebiliriz.
And after the Second World War, these relations has heightened, of course, with NATO.
Ve inişli çıkışlı olmakla beraber her iki ülkenin de menfaatini ön planda tutan ilişkilerimiz bugüne kadar devam etti geldi.
Although it may have some up and downs, the relations between countries has been both beneficial for both sides.
Ancak bugün gelinen noktada iki ülke arasında bir takım farklılıkların olduğunu, bir takım anlaşmazlıkların olduğunu çok net görebiliyoruz artık.
But now, when we look at today, we can see that there are some differences and some disputes between two countries today.
Bunların başında Suriye, Libya, Irak'ta yaşanan gelişmeler, özellikle PYD ve PKK'nın ve Amerika'nın bunlarla olan ilişkileri ve bu konulara farklı bakışımız, FETÖ elebaşısının hala Amerika'da ikamet ediyor olması, S-4 füzeleri ve bu S-4 füzelerinden kaynaklanan yaptırımlar bugün Türkiye ile Amerikan arasındaki en önemli ciddi anlaşmazlıklar olarak önümüzde durmaktadır.
Of course, today we see the disputes, misunderstanding between the two countries about Syria, Libya, and Iraq, and of course the different approaches to PYD and PKK, and the FETÖ residing in US, and of course the issues with the S-400 missiles.
Tabii Amerika tarafından Türkiye'nin F-35 projesinden çıkarılması veya dışarıda tutulması da bütün bu olumsuz yaklaşımların, olumsuz ilişkilerin belki de tuzu biberi olmuştur.
And there was some, of course, the Turkey being left out of the F-35 projects has been another grain salt on of all the topics that we have been discussing.
Fakat ben şuna inanıyorum, Amerika'da, Türkiye'de bu iki ülkenin hem ekonomik olarak hem siyasi olarak ve özellikle de NATO'nun bu bölgedeki en büyük gücü olarak bu iki ülkenin de ayrılmaz ve çok güçlü bağlar olduğuna inanıyoruz.
But I also do believe that with being the NATO members and being a strong force in this region, US and Turkey's strong relations and will continue from now on as well.
Bu webinarlar dizimizle ki özellikle bugün yapacağımız bu webinarla ben bu iki ülkenin ilişkilerinin detaylı olarak masaya yatırılacağını, her iki ülkenin de yararına olacağını canı gönülden inanıyorum.
With this webinar we're going to have today, I strongly believe that this will be very beneficial to further the relations between the two countries from now on.
Belki sorunlarla birlikte çözüm önerilerinin masaya yatırılması ve ele alınacağına inanıyorum.
And I also believe that with the problems that we're going to discuss, for sure we're going to also find some solutions to these problems as well during this webinar.
Ben dolayısıyla bu webinara katkı sağlayacak çok değerli konuşmacılarımıza şükran arz etmek istiyorum.
I'd like to extend my gratitude to very valuable participants to this webinar today.
Barış hocamıza, emekli büyükelçimiz Matev Braziyeki daha önce Azerbaycan Büyükelçiliği görevini yerine getiriyordu. Lük Kafe'ye, ondan sonra değerli Burak hocamıza, Yusuf Erim Bey'e ve tabii ki özellikle bu çalışmalarda öncülük rolü yapan Burak Kunday hocamıza ve Ali Çınar kardeşimize, ona da tekrar hoş geldin diyorum. İnşallah yakında görüşeceğiz. Hepsine çok teşekkür ediyorum katkılarından dolayı, emeklerinden dolayı ve de dinleyicilerimize saygılarımı sunuyorum. Hepinize hayırlı akşamlar diliyorum. iyi bir konferans, iyi bir bilgi dağarcığının, tecrübe paylaşımının, bilgi paylaşımının olacağı bir ortam olmasını diliyorum. Hepinize hayırlı akşamlar diliyorum.
I'd like to thank Professor Barış Özdal, the former Ambassador Matthew Briza, Luke Coffey, and Michael Doran, and of course, who's been wonderful at this project, Mr. Ali Çınar and Dr. Burak Küntay for being here with us today. And I'm sure that this will be a wonderful discussion here today at this Beni Bar. Thank you all for coming and being with us today.
Thank you very much, President Mr. Mustafa Aydın, the President of Istanbul Aydın University. Now I slowly open the floor to our panelists, but firstly I mentioned that we will build the webinar based on questions. I will give the speakers 2.5 minutes for each question. After the questions are completed, I will directly ask the questions from the participants to their respondent. You know, the first question of mine, because I am the moderator, you know, I am so relaxed now. So during the Trump era, even if many problems in bilateral relation could not be solved through the leader diplomacy, did not get worse. Will a relationship like Trump-Erdogan be between Biden and Erdogan, or we entering a period that inter-institutional relations more prominent and diplomacy channels will be operated more effectively? Yeah, please, considering the presence of character like Antony Blinken in the cabinet, can it be thought that the problems in bilateral relation will get worse, or as with election rhetoric be absolute and relations will improve? Really, I want to begin with the Ambassador Matthew Birza, but he has also 1 minute more. Why? Because I also want to ask him that what he thinks about the military coup attempt in Armenia, because he really knows the region very well. First, thank you very much again, Ambassador, for your participation. It is your time, please.
Thank you, Kutay Bey. 2.5 minutes plus 1 minute. Yes, so 3.5.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. And thank you for the opportunity to be here with so many amazing friends and people I've respected so deeply in many cases for many, many years. And Professor Aydın, thank you very much. So I think almost as a matter of simple arithmetic, I think the relationship between the US and Turkey is now immediately going to grow a little bit rockier than under Trump, because President Trump had his special affinity for President Erdogan. He talked about it many times. He just really liked President Erdogan, and therefore went the extra mile to try to shield Turkey for as long as possible against the sanctions under the Countering America's Adversaries through Sanctions Act for the S-400 purchase. So if you remove that positive factor, like an arithmetic equation, then things are maybe initially going to get worse. And I don't think there's any chance there's going to be the sort of back channel ways to solve problems like happened through the, well, frankly, through the two sons-in-law, right? Through Berat Albayrak and Jared Kushner. But the good news is that President Biden is a traditionalist when it comes to U.S. foreign policy. He is rebuilding the interagency process that Mike Dorn and I worked on separately, but well, simultaneously, but in different places. And so he's putting back in place the procedures to have a more organized and predictable U.S. foreign policy. And so I think that's probably will end up over time leading to better U.S.-Turkey relations, even if they're rocky at the beginning. And we saw in Tony Blinken's confirmation hearing, he said some pretty tough things about S-400s, right? I mean, he said in there that, you know, he was shocked that a strategic partner, and then he added a so-called or supposed strategic partner would buy such an advanced Russian weapons system. So for both those reasons, the absence of Trump and his special channels, the Albayrak Kushner channel, and the attitude of the Biden administration coming in, that the S-400 suggests that Turkey maybe is stepping outside the sphere of typical transatlantic relations. Things will get rough in the beginning, but later I think they're going to get better because of the systematic way Biden looks at foreign policy with NATO at the center. And you have to be brain dead if you look at the map and you look at the NATO members and you don't realize how important Turkey is to managing US objectives, whether it be, I'm coming to the South Caucasus or in Syria or Iraq or Iran or the Black Sea. And if you don't understand how Turkey has been the one force out there in the world that has countered Russian military aggression in Syria and in Libya. Switching to Armenia, I think it's not fully a military coup yet because the military doesn't know how far it can push. If you look at what the now fired chief of defense said earlier today, he said, okay, we're calling on Pashinyan to resign, but we don't want there to be violence against the children or those soldiers who fought so bravely in the war against Azerbaijan. To me, that was a recognition on the Armenian government side that they have limited room for maneuver. Pashinyan is trying to counter the military's now just a political move so far by rallying people and his supporters to the center of Yerevan. On the one hand, that escalates tension. On the other hand, that's what Haydar Aliyev did way back when to save his own, not only political skin, but his actual skin. So that may work. Last point, I've wondered since the Second Karabakh War began again in late September, how long Pashinyan could possibly survive. There was no way Armenia was going to win that war, no way. And there was no way Russia was going to come to his rescue. Putin can't stand Pashinyan because Pashinyan, came to power through street protests, which is Putin's greatest fear. And I think Putin has looked at Pashinyan as being reckless, just in the way he provoked this war with Azerbaijan and wanted Russia and the Collective Security Treaty Organization to get sucked in. But now Pashinyan maybe has some leverage over Putin because the November 10th agreement that's ended that war was brokered by Putin. And so if Pashinyan's out of the picture, that agreement will be seen as illegitimate in Armenia, and that will be a political blow to Vladimir Putin. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Probably now I think that the next webinar will be on the Caucasus, probably after that, and probably we will be together again, maybe. Now I want to give the floor one of my close friends and a distinguished expert on Turkish-American relations, Associated Professor Burak Kuntay. But Burak, especially Ambassador, mentioned the importance of Turkey for US for conducting the policies, especially the Caucasus, Iran, Iraq, Syria, and blah, blah, blah. But what do you think about that? Please also try to look from the Turkey side. And open please your microphone.
Okay, thank you so much for the great question. Mr. Mustafa Aydın, I would like to thank him first for his kind words. And definitely my great friend and abi, he's Mr. Kutay Karaca, thanks to invite me here. I have great friends here. Matt, my long time friend, he is a very important friend in my life. Ali Çınar is here, and the other distinguished analysts. It's a great honor to be here with you today. Now, let me just get into the point. I think it was the 50th year of NATO. I went to Washington, and I was together with President Demirel. We had a chance to meet. As you know, President Demirel is one of my mentors, the greatest mentors in my life. At that time, I think, Mr. Scowcroft, if I'm not mistaken, he was there. And during a small talk between a couple of people, somebody asked the question. I'm talking about year 2000. And think about it, long time ago. We are getting old, Matt. We are getting old. So at that time, when they asked the question to Mr. Demirel, how do you see the Turkish-American relations? Is it bumpy again? He said that it was bumpy, it is bumpy, it will be bumpy. Don't worry about anything. Turkish-American relations will always be bumpy. But the real thing is, these relations had never happened in one day and will never go away in one day. So Turkish-American relations based on different factors, different things. Now we have journalists here, great analysts here, diplomats here. So I don't want to overstep everybody's word, but I would like to analyze the question in a little bit academic point of view. As you know, in academic theory, we distinguish different countries, their relations from each other. Some relations based on personalities of the leaders, some relations based on the geography, some relations based on other things, the history. But Turkish-American relations, definitely Mr. Erdogan, his actions, Mr. Biden, Mr. Trump, Mr. Obama, Mr. Bush, Mr. Ecevit, they all played an important role by the decision-making with their characters. But one thing is certain when we analyze the historical Turkish-US relations, that Turkey and America is all about what happens in the world arena and its effects on the region. That designs the upcoming politics. That's why I hate one set word. Everybody asks, if Biden becomes the president, how is going to be the relations? I don't know. Nobody knows. Why? Because after Biden becomes the president, what's going to happen in the world is the important thing, not what Biden is saying. When Trump becomes a president, what's going to happen next day is the important. Nobody knew if the Libya issue, nobody knew the Morocco issue, the Arab Spring. When President Obama's policies we were discussing, but when the Arab Spring exploded, we said, oops, it's a different world now. We are talking in a different shape. So, President Trump and President Erdogan, yes, I agree, totally agree with Matt. We had personal channels between the leaders. Is it healthy? Better than nothing. Yeah, let's say that. But it is not the healthiest thing. Maybe against a lot of people, I'm going to say this, Mr. Biden and Turkey might have some more bumpy relations, but a lot more diplomatic relations. Because the way Mr. Biden, which I had a chance to meet with him, as Matt knows, during my past duties in Turkish-American relations, he knows Turkey, and the guy is not new to Turkey. He knows Turkey better than maybe anybody in the Washington these days. He was in the game, in the Senate for a long time and dealing with Turkish issues in Senate Foreign Relations Committee. But definitely we are not going to expect a huge change unless there's a big turmoil goes on in the region or in the area. But I'm going to see just the way of action. The approach is going to change, but the main policies is going to be on the main track unless, as I said, a huge change is going to happen in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Burak. I want one that the guys who follows us by YouTube, they use chat part of the YouTube to ask the question to our distinguished speakers. Now, Michael Duran from the Hudson Institute. Mr. Duran, what's your opinion if you compare the relations leader to leader that really what Professor Burak insisted and mentioned?
I think I generally agree with the comments of Matt Bryza and Mr. Burak. I just add a couple of little details in there. I'm very troubled, as I think probably all of us are, by the general lack of empathy for Turkey in Washington these days. And I mean, there has developed a kind of doctrine in Washington that Turkey is not an ally, that Turkey's hostile to the United States. I have personally heard senior intelligence officials tell me that the July coup attempt was a fabrication. I have had seasoned analysts of the Middle East tell me that Turkey is an ally of Russia against the United States. I've had seasoned analysts of the Middle East tell me that Turkey is allied with Iran against the United States. I mean, all of this, what they do is they take a little They take one little fact, some form of Iranian-Turkish engagement or some area where Iran and Turkey are moving in parallel, and they build a whole theory on the basis of this. And no one stands up and says, look, this is just nonsense. I mean, there are, in other words, there are a lot of silly ideas out there. And there is no constituency that I see, and maybe my colleagues can disabuse me of this notion. I wish they could. I hope they could. But I don't see any major constituency inside the U.S. government that sees itself as the kind of custodians of the relationship with Turkey. And that's very bad. And I see the Biden administration coming in and returning basically with the same picture. I'm not saying they're going to be identical policies, but they have the same picture that in their head right now that the Obama administration has. That's all the bad news. The good news is that the world has changed a lot since Barack Obama was in power. It's changed enormously. And Turkey's force posture in the region has changed significantly. So I think if you compare, I think that Israel and Saudi Arabia and Turkey, they all suffered from the Obama reorientation toward Iran. Whether they understand it that way or not, that's the way I see it. I think that the country that did the most to put itself in a position to have greater leverage over Washington is actually Turkey. And Turkey did that by establishing positions of power on the ground in Syria, in Libya, in Azerbaijan, in Somalia, and increasingly now in Iraq. And that will lead to friction, certainly, and it will lead to friction because of this general lack of empathy in Washington. But it's also going to put the Americans before a lot of very practical questions to which they do not have good answers because they have this outdated Obama picture of the world. So I think some creative diplomacy during these moments of friction could actually paradoxically move the relationship forward. But I think, as Mr. Burak said, it's going to be bumpy. I don't see any way, given the worldview in Ankara and the worldview in Washington, I don't see any way that this gets all, the S-400s and all the other areas of tension just kind of disappear. They're going to remain there, and they're going to be problematic, and there are going to be opportunities for things to get worse, but those opportunities for things to get worse will also be opportunities for things to get better.
Thank you, Mr. Michael Duran. Now I'll turn to Mr. Yusuf Erim. Yusuf, Mr. Michael, please. It is. I need glasses. So this today. Mr. Duran mentioned that the world has changed since Obama, and say Turkey did the most on the Azerbaijan, Syria, Iraq against Iran. Turkey did best. So what do you think about that? Really, the world has changed since Obama and compare this sentence with the relations of Turkey and the US then.
I think the world has definitely changed since the Obama administration. And while Turkey has been able to set up areas of power inside Syria, Libya, a presence in Azerbaijan, a growing presence in Iraq, I think the two biggest changes since the Obama administration was cleansing the government from the Gülenists and also the establishment of the presidential system. I think the presidential system has been very important brand of governance for Turkey. It's allowed President Erdogan to react very quick, react very dynamically. And since the failed coup attempt, we've seen Turkey take a forward deployed diplomatic approach in its affairs in overseas, whether it be counterterrorism, whether it be supporting its proxies, and also obviously the development and proliferation of the Turkish drone program has played a very, very important role. And I think one of the major problems right now in the US-Turkey relationship, putting the YPG aside, putting the S-400 aside, these are issues. I think the major problem is the framework, the makeup of the relationship. We're still looking at a security-centric relationship that was basically defined in the 1970s, 1960s to counter Russia. But the world's changed in half a century. Turkey does not fit into the mold that was created for it. So I think one of the most important things the United States could do is define new parameters, define a new role for Turkey that takes into account its new status, its prominence in the region, and its capabilities, because Turkey has a lot to offer the United States, and it could definitely be part of a big picture strategy in the Middle East, especially as the United States over the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, rolls out their Pivot to Asia program. And we're going to see the US take some of their finite military resources and shift them over to the Pacific. They're going to need a trustworthy ally to vanguard interests. They're going to need a trustworthy ally to ensure stability in the Middle East. While the Middle East may not be a priority, it will always be important for the United States. And we also need to take into account that the world is becoming multipolar. The United States needs to understand this. It can't look at issues black and white. When Turkey engages Russia diplomatically, when Turkey engages China diplomatically, which it has, it will, and in the future, that relationship may even grow. They need to understand that the Middle East is many shades of gray, and Turkey's an area that operates very well with gray zone policies. So the United States, at the end of the day, as many times as it wants to shuffle the deck with the Middle East, anytime it deals a hand, the high card's always going to be Turkey in its hand. And it's got to understand that, it's got to respect that, it's got to give some breathing room to Turkey. Yes, there are contentious issues, but I think it's time to at least sit down and negotiate on new issues. I think we need to compartmentalize, both sides need to empathize, they need to curb their expectations. I know the YPG, very contentious issue. Turkey needs to understand that America right now has put itself in a swamp in that position. I think Turkey could curb some of its expectations and at least do some damage control with the YPG-US relationship, where it makes it an acceptable level of national security threat, because I do not see the United States backing out of that relationship anymore. It's become too entrenched. From the other side, with the S-400, the United States needs to understand that if it's going to sit down and have a conversation with Turkey regarding the Russian air defense system, that it can't create superficial leverage and expect that to be a bargaining chip. Any conversation needs to start with a replacement. Any conversation needs to start with the understanding that this is Turkish national security. But after a rocky start, I do think that Biden and Erdogan will be able to get along. They understand each other. They know each other very, very well. And at the end of the day, as long as Biden prefers working through coalitions, Turkey, its factory settings are NATO. So Turkey can work through NATO to improve its relationship with the United States. It can work through allies in the region as well. I think Israel is a very important address to be able to talk to the United States through. I see a Iran relationship right now quickly deteriorating, and I think that's something that is going to change. We're going to see a huge butterfly effect of Biden in the region with his policies, and it's very important the position that Turkey's going to take on these issues. This is something that Burak was mentioning. Everything's not bilateral. The United States, very big, very powerful country. When it comes into the region, it creates massive butterfly effects. So there's going to be a lot of reacting to these issues and how Turkey deals with them and how Turkey engages other regional partners.
Okay, thank you very much. With the same question, Mr. Luke Coffey from the Policy Center at the Heritage Foundation. Yusuf mentioned that Turkey is a lot of offer to the US. What do you think about that, Dan?
Firstly, I want to thank the Istanbul Aydan University for inviting me to speak here today and putting together this panel. And it's great to see so many familiar faces and friends on the screen. And I hope that someday soon we can all do this in person around the same table. That would be fantastic. it's difficult to follow such a distinguished group of experts who've spoken on the same question, but I'll give it my best to offer something new to the debate. I personally am not ready to throw away more than 7 decades of a good, strong, bumpy at times, but reliable security bilateral relationship with Turkey for 7 or so rough years of competition or conflict or animosity or dispute. I think that we need to, both sides need to find ways to better understand each other, understand what drives each other, and come back to the table to try to work some of these issues out. Now, I have a few points to make based off everything I've heard. You posed the question initially about what does a Biden-Erdogan relationship look like? And sometimes I think we get too fixated on the leaders. And the relationship, the bilateral relationship between the US and Turkey is one that really has its foundations on the institutional relationships between the two countries, whether it's military to military cooperation, intelligence to intelligence agency cooperation. Even throughout this rocky period, I would argue that many of these institutional relationships have continued and have worked. So I don't think we should forget about that aspect of the US-Turkish relationship. We should keep that in mind. But in terms of going forward to improve the relationship, I think, as already mentioned, Yusuf definitely mentioned this idea of maybe acknowledging that these big issues, such as S-400, such as America's support to PYD, PKK in northern Syria, we need to maybe park these to the side for now. I know it's very easy for me to say this, or for us to say this at a panel like this, but park these to one side, and we need to go back to like old-fashioned diplomatic confidence building measures. And we need to find areas that we can cooperate on, where we have shared interests, and start with those and then build our way back up. It might take some time, but really, I think this is the only way we can do this going forward. And I hate to use a baseball analogy. I mean, normally I don't use any sports analogy, but I will in this case, which is terrible considering it's an international audience. But we need to start hitting singles instead of trying to go for the home run. Okay, we need to get men on base, little bits at a time, in order to get some points up on the scoreboard in the U.S.-Turkish relationship. And real quickly, if I may, just 4 areas where I think there could be some confidence building, where we have shared interests. One is on NATO and the idea of NATO enlargement, which the enlargement aspect of NATO is almost absent in the debate in the transatlantic community. Turkey is a strong supporter of NATO enlargement. The U.S. traditionally has been. And this is one area that we could focus on together. And also, NATO is now in the process of writing its next strategic concept. The last strategic concept was written in 2010. I mean, think what has happened in the world since 2010. That's a whole nother panel discussion that we could have. So NATO desperately needs this new strategic concept. And the United States should acknowledge Turkey's role and geopolitical position in many of the challenges that NATO faces, and the U.S. should ensure that Turkey's voice is heard in the formulation of this next NATO strategic concept. The second is on Ukraine. The Biden administration, I think, will be very good on U.S.-Ukraine relations, especially the security and economic relationship. I think it's good news what we've heard about Turkey and Ukraine signing a defense export agreement for defense sales. Turkey has been one of the most vocal advocates to raise awareness of the persecution of the Crimean Tatars. And of course, religious freedom is an issue that many in the U.S. take very seriously on both sides of the aisle. So I think Ukraine could be an issue where the U.S. and Turkey can cooperate. The third area is on Central Asia and even Afghanistan. I don't see the Biden administration changing the Central Asian strategy that was announced almost a year ago to the day, in fact, at the Heritage Foundation, I must say. A little self-promotion there. The Central Asian strategy that was announced a year ago, I don't see the Biden administration changing the strategy. It was a solid strategy based on policy and geopolitics, and it wasn't partisan in any way. And in that strategy, the U.S. really focused on improving economic ties with Central Asia, security ties with Central Asia, and of course, Turkey for historical, cultural, linguistic, economic reasons. It could be America's way in to most of Central Asia, at least. And then finally, energy security, U.S. focus on 3 Cs initiative. Even though Turkey is not part of 3 Cs initiative, one thing I've been advocating is for the 3 Cs initiative to expand its membership outside of the EU countries that are on the Adriatic, Baltic, or Black Seas. And Turkey is an obvious candidate for this, I think. And the U.S. seems very interested in continuing work on the 3 Cs initiative. Now, in conclusion, I will say, if you want to go big, if you want to go for the home run, I'll throw an idea out there. Some say it's crazy, some say it's interesting, but I guarantee it'll spark debate. And I think we should focus on the S-400 issue if we want to go the big ticket item. And one of my proposals have been that the United States quietly assures Turkey that a Patriot sale will be forthcoming. And Turkey sends its S-400s to Azerbaijan for a training exercise.
Maybe we will also discuss the next questions on Patriots S-400, blah, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
Please, okay.
Yeah.
The last is one of my close friends, Ali Çınar. Ali, you welcome to Turkey firstly, and just looks at that Turkey U.S. relation on Trump era, in Trump era, just too fixed on leaders. Do you think like that?
I agree. Thank you for having me, Dr. Kutay Karaca, and good to see all good friends here. When you look at the Trump,
you are host. You know that.
Yes. Yes.
Ali Çınar, because a member of our university also. Okay.
Yeah, I'm very happy to lecture at the school. Definitely. When you look at the Trump administration, I totally agree. There was a personal relationship between President Trump and President Erdogan. And when we look at the State Department, Pentagon, sometimes both government institutions knew the latest developments later after Erdogan and President Trump speaks. So it was a different mechanism. But right now, under Biden administration, we see mostly from State Department and Pentagon statements about Turkey. So White House right now, there is no any statement about Turkey. And my surprise is it has been almost a month now, still President Biden and President Erdogan has not spoken. And I don't think it's a good sign. Same with Minister of Defense, Hulusi Akar, and Secretary of Defense, Austin. They have not spoken. It's almost a month. So what I see is there is no good perception on Turkey under Biden administration. And I can understand there are issues as 400 human rights issue, detained U.S. consulate employees, Halkbank cases coming, FETÖ, YPG, PKK. So when you look at these all issues, it's not only from the Biden administration, it's coming from Obama to Trump, now Trump to Biden administration. So many issues have not been resolved. So it still remain as it is. So what needs to be done is, I think I see a trust issue between two NATO allies, and it's a big problem. From the US side, human rights is a big problem, S-400 is a big problem. Unfortunately, Turkey is coming with different proposals, joint committee and other models that Turkey is proposing, but United States is crystal clear. As an American with a Turkish descent, we always tell the Turkish side, United States will not change their policy on this issue because it's a law. So there is nothing Biden administration we do on S-400. Turkey has to change her mind actually on this. Otherwise, we see that crisis increasing more and more on upcoming months. So I am trying to be optimistic on Turkey-US relationship, but there are a lot of mistrust issue between two NATO allies. And what needs to be done is diplomacy. And Mevlut Çavuşoğlu and Secretary Blinken has spoke. It was a good start, but still Erdogan and Biden has not spoken. Same with the defense secretary and the ministry. So first of all, this trust issue needs to be resolved. At the same time, open dialogue, sincere dialogue, especially on the military side. What I'm seeing is both sides on the military channels, it has been not strong as in the past. We don't see a strong communication right now on the military channels. So these both sides has to sit down and talk on the military levels by PG, PKK, S-400. This is the most important part. Diplomacy and the trust, I think, are the most important for these two NATO allies. Otherwise, Russia is happy, Iranians are happy. United States should not push Turkey toward Iran and Russia. Since 1950s, both countries fought shoulder to shoulder. And as Luke said, transatlantic relations, NATO Secretary General should take more leadership on the issues, what we are seeing between Turkey and United States. But transatlantic and NATO should be the best platform for both countries to solve the issues. Otherwise, we'll keep, making Russians and Iranians happy once the tensions go up more.
Thank you very much, Ali. Maybe we can also discuss what you say or what you mentioned till the second question. Now I again turn to Ambassador Matthew. Mr. Matthew, in the new era, one of the most important issues in Turkey-US relations will be purchase of, S-400 from the Russia. How will Trump's rhetoric, which gives Turkey rights, find answers in the new era? If the US can't develop a proposal or chooses to pressure, can it get the results? And please, for everybody, we have a limited time, so obey the time, okay? Sure. Matthew, please.
Sure. I think that there is not going to be, there's no space for the Trump effort to shield Turkey against negative consequences in Washington because of the S-400 purchase. As everyone has said, as Mike has said, everybody has said that, right now, strategically, Turkey's brand is seen as toxic in Washington. And it goes back really in many ways to the S-400 purchase. This is a point I think is not appreciated in Turkey. Turkey was the first country to buy a strategic Russian weapon system after Russia invaded Ukraine and annexed Crimea, right? From 2014 until 2017, when Turkey signed the agreement with Russia, everybody, the rest of the NATO's allies, right, except maybe Hungary, were trying to impose costs on Russia for having done what it did to Ukraine. And then Turkey came in and bought a strategic Russian system. It gave Russia some oxygen. And let's all recall that was after there had been some Turkish policy decisions to, as I recall, it was to take advantage of the embargo on Russia and do business with Russia around the sanctions of the EU and the United States. So I think that shook the strategic thinkers in Washington very, very deeply and made them believe that maybe Turkey is in the midst of a strategic shift toward Russia. I think that's wrong. I think that Turkey is, as I said in my opening remarks, it's the only country that has militarily confronted Russia on the ground and in the air in Syria and in Libya and successfully and fought Russia to a halt. And Turkey is the counterbalance right now to Russia in Azerbaijan after Nagorno-Karabakh. But I'm just trying to describe what it seems to me the attitude is. On top of that, there's the military technological argument of some very senior US Air Force officers that Luke and Mike and I have talked to in recent weeks, that maybe, well, that, okay, perhaps the Crete example that Minister Akar has suggested to resolve the S-400 problem could work, which would be that Turkey would really not operationalize or turn on the S-400 system except for occasional tests. Yeah, a lot of us have been advocating something like that for the last couple of years. But in our conversations, at least in mine, with these very senior former US Air Force officials, I mean, as senior as you can go, I could sense they just don't trust Turkey, their NATO ally. They don't trust that Turkey is going to keep the information that is gathered by the S-400 radars about the F-35 safe. But ultimately, my last point, that is a political issue. The lack of trust in Turkey's ability to safeguard that technology, that NATO and US technology, is a political issue. Because if we can get the US-Turkey relationship generally back on track, maybe parking some other issues, as Luke was suggesting, then I think you might see these US military folks, former and current, saying, maybe this proposal by Turkey makes sense. And I do think Ukraine is somewhere to focus, to reinforce Luke's comments. I think the military technological cooperation agreements that have been reached between Turkey and Ukraine is something that the Biden administration is going to embrace. Let's recall, it was then Vice President Biden to whom Obama turned, right? To take the lead on the US policy to punish Russia for invading Ukraine and annexing Crimea. So I think that's one of the areas where we should really focus. A million more things to say, but I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Now I want to ask Burak that Matt mentioned that if the S-400 is not operationalized except occasional tests, may be acceptable. Do you think that Turkey accept this situation or not? You please open your microphone, Burak.
I'm sorry about it, guys. I always forget it. Now, what Matt says is one of the solutions. Yeah, it can be considered. But let's think about the roots, why we are in this situation currently. And let's remember that, because sometimes we talk too much about the current situation and we forget how it evolved.
But maybe most of the Turkish experts really discuss what you say now.
Exactly.
How we can this situation?
Hocam, I remember very well because around 2009 till today, Matt should remember, we were talking in several meetings. I was at the board of American Turkish Council, whom at that time Mr. Brent Scowcroft was the chairman. Mustafa Koç, late Mr. Mustafa Koç was the vice chairman. And I was also at the board of American Turkish Council, Business Council in Turkey, TAİK. And the representatives of Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, all these huge companies, Boeing, were in the boards of especially the American side. I was in the board of both of them. And almost since 2009, I had been witnessing about the purchases. We had been joining in the meetings, how the purchase of the weapons is going to evolve, how it is going to affect the relationships, etc. In 2009 till 2018, this situation continues, right? And in 2013, almost this deal was going to be set. Let's all remember that. I'm not mistaken, right? It was 2013. It was almost going to be all set. Yeah, we were purchasing the Patriots, but something happened. Something changed the game. If we want to talk about the solution, first we have to understand what was the main disputes, what was the main problems that stopped that 2013 deal. This opinion might change according to a lot of people, but for me, one, Syria issue, because at that time, when Turkey was talking about intervening in the Syria situation, serious clashes started, especially with the US Congress and Turkey. So that was the first thing. Obama administration and all these, Syria issue. Let's put this one side. The second one, definitely, gentlemen, Turkey wants to buy the Patriots, but we are going to pay money for this. So the cheaper we get it, the better it is. So we have to get it as cheap as possible. So while we were negotiating, Turkey used as a bargaining material the China deal. Let's all remember, because sometimes we forget, people think that we directly jump into Russia, missiles, but first we, brought on the table the China thing. Anyway, we will talk about that. And the third thing, which was so interrupting, to be honest, making comments, especially from the Congress side. We can sell the weapons, we can, approve it, but you have to fix this in your political system. You have to do this in your political environment. Now, let's be honest. We are allies, two partners, both countries have values, but too much involvement in your decision-making progresses in your country makes the community, makes the people and the media a little bit anti whatever or whoever says this, anti anything, right? So these three issues suddenly escalate the situation, and then China card is gone, and we find in our hands the Putin's great and beautiful turnover. He's gonna get the chance Russia lost in 1946. What was in 1946 thing? Maybe all of us remembers it so clear, but for the audiences, I want to remind it again. When things are going well with Soviets and Turkey, suddenly Soviets wanted to change the Meriç River boundaries, the Montreux Agreement. They stopped the agreements they had been making with Turkey, Kars-Ardahan border. I mean, Turkey was shocked, and President Truman used it so well. And he immediately sent USS Missouri, $300 million to Russia, 100 to Turkey. So with a mistake, strategic mistake, Soviets did, they lost their ally at that time, Turkey, to United States. Now, the question is this: all the responsibility, all the mistake is just about Turkey's, or during the negotiations, during the approach, during the way handling of these things, also United States, I believe, had serious, I don't want to say motive, but I want to say a little bit more the way they approach with their NATO ally. You have to feel like an ally in that sense. Anyhow, when getting close to what Matt said, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the 2018 deal was 3.5 billion, then dropped down to 2.5 million. But still, the US Congress, the resolutions over there, by the way, I'm not talking about CATSA. I'm talking about the over 30 resolutions since 2017, affected the Turkish-American relations and this issue well. Can it be solved? Absolutely. First, let me say this. Absolutely, it can be solved, but as I said at the very first question, it's all about the environment. It's all about what we are going to gain from this. And if we really want to be together again, not only as a NATO ally, but in any other aspects, especially maybe we will talk in the future, but in the Middle East and Asia concept. Thank you. Sorry to keep it long.
Thank you, Burak. Mr. Michael Duran, really, on the S-400 issue, all the mistakes belong to Turkey or not? What do you think about that?
Yes, all of them belong to
It
Turkey.
is. It is
No.
so difficult question that.
No, I don't think they all belong to Turkey. Although I really wish Turkey hadn't done it. And I think that I understand. I think I understand why Turkey did it, and I understand all of the frustration that led Turkey to take this step. But I think it, especially what it did in Congress, and not just Congress, but also, Matt Bryza mentioned in the military. It brought constituencies into the discussion of U.S.-Turkish relations who didn't have a strong opinion before, or they were not really engaged. It solidified an anti-Turkish position there because it was interpreted as a strategic step against the United States. And there are other issues as well. I talked to some military officials, and I said, because the Turks are always saying, let's put together an expert committee to study all of this. And I said, what about that proposal? And they said, well, we could do that, but that's only one little minuscule part of the issue. We have another issue, and that is that there are now a number of countries that are standing in line to buy S-400s. That includes Egypt, it includes India, possibly Saudi Arabia. And I think the Americans fear that if they don't make a stand or take a stand on this issue, they'll have a whole host of their allies going to Moscow. So I don't think the Americans or the Turks are being totally honest with each other when they sit down at the table to talk about the issue. I mean, the Turks repeat over and over again, basically this was just a deal. We chose it's just a business deal. We chose the S-400 because the speedy delivery and cost and joint joint technical development and so on. I agree with what Mr. Borak just said. There's a much larger context. The Turks were very aware of the larger context in which they did this, and that's why they did it. I mean, that's my view. To put it in very, very simple terms, the Turks were sending a message to the Americans. If you're going to align with the YPG, our number one security threat, the PKK, our number one security threat, you can't take us for granted. You can't take us for granted. And also they maybe throw in the Gulen question there as well. And you are taking us for granted. And by the way, we have other options. It might be useful if a group of experts were to sit down and actually sketch out, I'm talking about people who are not in the governments, sketch out what they think the real calculations on both sides were to this issue, just to kind of describe the problem in all of its dimensions. But I think that could be a useful exercise, and it may shift the conversation a little bit, and maybe create a little bit more empathy on both sides for the positions that people are taking. But I'm a little bit pessimistic about a direct run at this issue being able to solve it. I think the much more effective way forward is the one that has been suggested by Yusuf said we need to have a framework, a strategic framework for understanding it. I heard that in different ways from Matt Bryza. I heard it from Luke Coffey. If we can find areas where we actually agree with each other on big strategic questions, then I think some of these major friction points will become easier to manage. But I think we're for some time we're going to be in a position of managing it rather than actually solving it completely. Can I just add one other thing on that, or is my time up? I should never ask that question. I'm just going to run right in there.
We have more questions for you. Don't worry about that.
So
okay.
I'll stop there.
Yusuf Erim, that number of countries stay in the line to buy Russian S-400. So what do you think about this issue on Turkish-American relations?
First of all, I think the S-400 is much less a U.S.-Turkey bilateral issue, and that's exactly the point.
I agree with you, but the last question is PYD and YPC.
The S-400. Now, just to touch on something that Burak said when he was just rewinding and going back to the history, I think one of the very most important aspects was NATO allies withdrawing Patriots from Turkey during the Syrian civil war, I believe 2015. I think that really justified in the hearts of the Turkish leadership this decision to go with the S-400 or the Chinese missile, a non-American missile, seeing NATO allies withdraw Patriots. And I think that was a huge break right there. I think that's an issue that is not talked about enough, that really destroyed and deteriorated confidence. Now, let's get to the Crete model. Now, the Crete model has been discussed. I think the Crete model on paper, it looks okay, but when you try to apply it, putting a $2 billion system and leaving it in the garage, only operating it at times of heightened national security, that doesn't really meet Turkey's national security concerns. And from a legal aspect, I don't know how that would be able to be worked around TATSA as well. So I think the Crete model in application is ineffective, but it shows that Turkey has some political will to create some diplomatic space with the United States. And I think that it's Turkey reaching its hand out and saying, let's get back to the table and start talking about the S-400 again, rather than talking via the media, rather than talking via spokesmen. So I think that it's showing some diplomatic will on behalf of the Turks. So that's very important. I think more intriguing than the Crete model is the coffee model, having the S-400 placed in a different location. Now, Luke signaled Azerbaijan. I would like to signal somewhere that would probably be more acceptable to the Turks, which would be Northern Cyprus. I think any type of placement in Northern Cyprus would greatly appease Turkey's national security concerns, but I don't know how that would go over with the EU, obviously. So that could create other problems, maybe not problems with the United States, but problems with the EU. And also one more thing I wanted to talk about. We are always concentrating on the Patriots for the S-400s. I think the EU could play a very important factor in this, and there's many European alternatives, most namely Eurosam, the SAMP-T. I think these are very, very important missile defense systems. I think that Turkey has lost its confidence in the US Congress for approving a deal for Patriots. Many Turks now feel that they're getting a shadow qualitative military edge band, qualitative military edge band by US Congress. And I think that Turkey might feel more comfortable with a European alternative to the S-400 rather than the Patriots. So I think this is something where a multilateral approach, having the EU come in, having Brussels come in to this situation, maybe as a mediator, maybe as a secondary alternative solution, which can actually get the ball rolling diplomatically even more quickly, maybe offering some carrots to Turkey on the EU side to get them away from the S-400 as well. So I think the United States needs to use the different alternatives in its toolkit to engage Turkey on the S-400. It shouldn't just be a bilateral issue. You have the EU in your toolkit. You have NATO in your toolkit. There are other alternatives that are acceptable by both NATO and the United States. So I think they need to think outside the box a little. I think Turkey is ready to seriously sit down at the table with the United States regarding this issue. Hopefully we'll see the same diplomatic will coming from Washington, and they'll be able to find someone that's ready to actually think outside the box and be able to institute some of these alternative areas of diplomacy where an S-400 deal could be reached.
Thank you very much. Maybe I can now ask the other questions because we have time limited that, and we can also ask the other questions together, and especially I want the floor to Matthew. Why? Because he has any other program after 8:15, I think. No, open your.
It's okay. It's okay. Please.
It's okay. That's great. Okay, then. Okay, that's great. Maybe look, Yusuf mentioned the main problem for the Turkish-American relations in the future, that PYD, YPC, it is, that the PKK linked organization. And do you expect a dramatic change in the US PYD, YPG policy in the Biden administration? Can the US support for a PKK link organization be explained only by the fight against ISIS? In other words, can a terrorist organization be destroyed by another terrorist organization? It is a Turkish question, but maybe, all over the world, the meaning of terrorism and meaning of terrorists are explained differently. What will the position of Russia in Syria if US in the future still support the PYD and YPG?
Yeah, thanks for that question. My views on U.S. support to these groups in Syria are well known. I would never justify or argue to give any sort of weapons to what is essentially a neo-Marxist terrorist organization. Call me old-fashioned, but as an American, I don't think this is really a wise idea to do. Biden was part of the administration, part of the process that decided to do this, because I think President Obama was caught without a strategy when Americans were starting to get their heads cut off live on the internet. And President Trump doubled down on this strategy because, as he said on the campaign trail, and I'll quote him, he's going to bomb the shit out of ISIS. And he didn't really care how it was done, as long as it was done. So fast forward to where we are today, America is stuck in this relationship with the PYD. There is no meaningful discussion on how to get out of this relationship now in the United States, simply because Syria is no longer part of the foreign policy discourse. For whatever reason, it's rarely discussed. Most Americans probably are not even aware that we still have troops there after Trump, with all this fanfare, announced that US troops were leaving, and then most of them stayed. I would say your average American thinks that there are no more US troops in Syria. So it's a good thing and a bad thing. The fact that it's not discussed is a good thing in the sense that it's no longer, ISIS, its presence is no longer there in the way it was before. The U.S. is focused on other issues, but it's also a bad thing in the sense that it allows certain sectors of the U.S. government to continue this strategy because they don't see a need to correct it. They don't see a need to find a way out of it. So it just kind of goes on. I don't want to use the term forever war, because actually I don't like this term, but it allows the strategy to go on forever because it's not being discussed. I don't think that the U.S. support to the PYD and YPG should be one of the top issues that is addressed in the U.S.-Turkish relationship. I think both sides right now need to do what they can to ensure their own national interests and find other areas to work on. But I would never, to answer your question directly, no, you cannot successfully defeat one terrorist organization with another terrorist group. And the example I give to my British friends is that imagine the US is arming a wing of the IRA to fight another terrorist organization. It would be completely unacceptable. But for some reason, this was acceptable to many in the US foreign policy community at the time.
You know that in G20 last year in July, President Trump also accepted that the link between PKK and PYD, YPG. What are you thinking about that? For Turkey, it's a security problem and the future problem of Turkey. So from the Turkish side, really the support of US to PYD, YPG is a main issue on Turkish-American relations?
Yeah, of course. And I completely understand this. And I think this issue with the U.S. support to YPG is an example of the U.S. policymakers not thinking about the second and third order effects to the decisions that we make. And I think at the time we the Obama administration, including as Vice President Joe Biden, made promises to Turkey that we could never keep, that they would stay east of the Euphrates, that we would collect the weapons up after the fighting was over. I mean, this is crazy. Anyone who has ever been to a combat zone knows that the idea of collecting the weapons up after it's finished is ridiculous. So we made these promises that we couldn't keep to Turkey. We've had multiple administrations now continue with this policy. And I think all of this is enabled by this disdain for Turkey that many in Congress have, many in the think tank community have, that Mike was talking about. It's not that these congressmen or these think tankers have some sort of affinity to a neo-Marxist terrorist organization. It's that they don't want to think about it being the YPG being a neo-Marxist terrorist organization, because it's just another way to make it's another way to put pressure on Turkey. That's how they view it, which is a very lazy, unsophisticated approach, but it's the reality that we're facing.
I want to turn to Ali Çınar. Ali, what do you think about that? The PYD YPG issue. Please open your microphone, but it's closed. Okay.
So the reality is there is no solution without Turkey in Middle East. So whoever wants a peace in Syria or other neighbors in the region, they have to deal with Turkey. So there are a few actually wrong perceptions when you look at YPG, PKK. First of all, United States thinks mostly, or at some point, that it's Erdogan's problem, President Erdogan's problem, as 400 YPG, PKK, but it's not. This is a bipartisan issue. It's a national security issue. So if Erdogan goes and if you see a new president, this issue will still remain and there will be a strong reaction against this issue. So the PKK, YPG issue will not go away unless US change mind on this issue. So we need to be very clear that this is a national security issue. It's not Erdogan's problem, it's Turkish people problem. Lost 40,000 Turkish citizens in 40 years. So a very sensitive issue. So in Washington, I mean, thanks to Luke and Michael Doran, they educate and generate awareness, but most of the experts and some so-called experts, they don't understand that it's a national security issue for Turkey. But at the same time, Turkey cannot blame only United States when it comes to YPG, PKK, because let's look at Russia. Russia doesn't recognize PKK as a terrorist organization. YPG, PYD has an office in Moscow. So
maybe the next question is about Russian position in Syria and also in Middle East.
So before that, so YPG, PKK is a very sensitive issue. Brett McGurk is at the National Security Council. He's a pro-YPG supporter, but at the same time, there are really experts, official experts that are at the Biden administration understand the Turkey's position. So, but Biden administration will not change their position. They are financially will support YPG, PKK, and we are seeing some new developments in the region. So it will be a very problematic issue for Turkey-US relationship. So again, it comes to dialogue and sincere open communication, not just the political side, but the military side. When I talk with the retired Turkish and American generals, they believe the military cooperation, but the current one, especially CENTCOM, they are changing their mind. It's very getting very risky and dangerous for the military alliance. So military side has to sit down and try to solve the issues. And yes, United States is present in Syria because of fighting against Daesh. We don't want Russia and Iran in the region, especially in Syria. But this was a lack of President Obama's foreign policy in Syria. Because of that, now Russia and Iran took advantage. So definitely United States and Turkey should work together in Syria, in Middle East. Otherwise, this tension will increase in upcoming days.
Ali, thank you very much. I'll turn to Ambassador Matthew. You know, Ambassador, I don't know the time, but in Obama administration offered Turkey to separate PKK from PYD, YPG, you know. So I am a retired colonel from Turkish Air Force also. When I asked this question, I also smile. Why? Because they are really connected, really connected. So do you think that it is possible to separate PKK from the YPG, PYD? Is it? And also connect this question with the last question of me, please.
Yeah, of course not. I mean, they're the same organization. As Mike Doran has taught many of us. I remember at the TRT World Forum a couple of years ago. Thank you, Yusuf. Mike made one of the most compelling presentations I've ever heard on how they're the same organization, and the Obama administration just rebranded the YPG or PKK as the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces. And I know from my time on the NSC staff, where I for a little while served simultaneously with Mike, but back at the State Department, that the PKK often changes the names of its organizations to confuse all of us. So, you know, it's the PKK, okay, their headquarters may be in Kandil Mountain, but they, you know, their main goal is Turkey, but it's not the only goal. So in Iran, they don't, because the US, and then thanks to US encouragement, the EU designated the PKK a terrorist organization. Well, they had to change their name. So they were the Pejak in Iran, or the Freedom Falcons, or they're the YPG, PYD in Syria. But it's the same organization. It's the same personnel. I mean, in terms of management, and then they have their folks on the ground in various countries. So it was incredibly naive to talk about separating the PKK from itself. You can't separate yourself from yourself. So that was to me a sign of, I don't know how else to put it, but ill intent. Our former colleagues and friends who are still in the US government and were back then, they know the truth. They know the truth. And it's an inconvenient truth, to borrow a phrase from former Vice President Al Gore in the climate change context. It's an inconvenient truth to recognize the reality that the YPG and the PKK are one organization. My last point, because in one of the emails preparing for this discussion, somebody had asked, well, could it be that, is it really just the desire to fight these so-called Islamic State or ISIS that led the US to partner with the YPG? And I look forward to Mike's comments, but I think the answer is yes. In all my discussions at very senior levels in Washington in recent years, it was clear to me that the US, especially the Central Command, did not want to put 30,000 American soldiers on the ground to defeat ISIS. And there were some crisis moments. And when the US had come back to Turkey and said, are you willing to put your troops on the ground, 30,000 of them, to defeat ISIS and prevent the cancer of ISIS from spreading to Europe? I think Turkey was not ready, and instead was willing to offer maybe 10% of that number of trained and equipped Arab forces. And I think Washington just made a Faustian deal, a deal with the devil, and said, we're gonna call these terrorists something else. We'll call them the Democratic Forces, because that'll mean fewer American troops will die. And I think that's a problem that is too big to resolve now, as several of us were saying, as Burak was saying, and Yusuf. Maybe we need to park some of those issues and loop to the side, and let's work on some things we can resolve. And I'm done here. I mentioned Ukraine and Turkey military technology. I think Eastern Mediterranean is somewhere where there can be some progress right now, and Azerbaijan, where Turkey, its peacekeepers, are the counterweight to Russian peacekeepers on the ground. And that's something that hasn't been appreciated enough or at all in NATO, but needs to be. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Burak, also, I asked the same question, but I want to mention something on that. You know, after the Gara operation, the U.S. State Department spokesman said in a statement that if the reports of the deaths of Turkish civilians at the hands of the PKK are confirmed, what do you think about that? Is a big problem, really, you know, that Turkish-American relations? For me, it is the first problem. With this,
For me, it is the only problem.
Yeah, it's also true.
Jimmy, why it's the only problem? Let's be frank, gentlemen. We can negotiate about anything as 400s. We can negotiate things about Eastern Europe, the energy issues, a lot of things. But there are some stuff for some countries, it is the life or death issue. And PKK, look, I'm not talking as an academician at this point. I'm leaving all my titles aside. I'm speaking as a reasonable Turkish man, a Turkish nationalist, right? There's a terrorist organization since 80s killing me, okay, attacking me. Not recently, since 80s I'm talking about. Over 40,000 people, and ethnically, a lot of them are Kurds too. Kurdish citizens of Turkey, innocent people. All these Turkish citizens were killed by PKK terror organization. Şimdi, this is not negotiable. Turkey, we are going to, not only as the government, but also as the people, will destroy eventually, sooner or later, PKK. That's simple and easy. Your name is PYD. It is a political wing. We don't care. We know it is PKK. Your name is YPG. We don't care. It is PKK. There are triplets, right? They are the same brotherhood, same thing. And I'm not saying this. When you asked Matt, please correct me if I'm mistaken. I think Secretary Esper, right? When he was answering in Senate Arms Committee, the question of Mr. Lindsey Graham, he officially said this. I mean, not me. He's the one saying the official relations.
It was Ashton Carter.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Lindsey Graham asked the question, right? Am I right? Good. So at that point, he officially stated the relationship. Do we needed it? Not at all. Kutay Hocam, let me tell you two things. America Kurds, Russia Kurds, and Turkey Kurds, and then I will finalize it. Remember, we all learned it when we were doing the academic researches. I actually worked on this a little bit in my early years of academia. Do you remember Mullah Mustafa Barzani, who passed away in 1979? When you understand if America's policy is going to change about YPG or PYD, also Russia's, right? You cannot talk from today or YPG, PYD. You have to go all the back to Mullah Mustafa Barzani with the support of Russia, Soviets, let's say. In 1946, they founded Mohat Kurdish Republic. We all remember that, right? That was a Kurdish Republic in Mahat. Lasted, I think Mohammed Ghazi was the president of this, and Mullah Mustafa Barzani was the head of the military. Remember, right? You know what happened? It was founded in Iran with the support of Russia. But suddenly Russia shake hands with Iran, and Russia said, bye-bye, I'm leaving. They left, and the next day, the republic is gone by the Iran. Russia didn't even say anything. They captured Mohammed Ghazi, and they executed him. And then Mullah Mustafa Barzani went to Iranian embassy of United States. They didn't accept the guy, right? Şimdi, let's be honest, gentlemen. Russia and United States will never leave their Kurdish card in the region. Strategically, that is needed for these two big countries, okay? And if anybody tells me these countries are going to dramatically change their view about the Kurdish politics, which lasted from 1960s, 1950s, it is not going to happen. But Turkey is a player in the region. Kurds are the players in the region, and I'm not even talking about PKK, YPG, or PYD. The people in this region must solve it with their peaceful and normal ways. But nobody should expect from Turkey to negotiate with PKK, YPG, or PYD. Long word short, Every problem with US-Turkey can be solved via diplomacy. But this is out of diplomacy. This is something we have to destroy the terrorist organization. ISIS is the same thing. Al-Qaeda is the same thing. Whoever is going to try to destroy the world's peace and prosperity is same for us, should be same for US, should be same for Russia. Otherwise, we keep on talking about this years and years and years. And at the end, we can do more conferences and outcome will be zero. PKK and his brothers will eventually be destroyed by Turkey. I'm saying it so honestly, and it is not negotiable.
So, Michael, we have so limited time, but approximately 5 or 6 minutes. But I want to learn what you think about the PKK and it's the connected of PKK of PYD, YPG.
Okay, I won't take more than 10 of those 6 minutes. So let me just make a couple of quick points. I want to disagree slightly with my friend Matt Bryza, slightly. I agree with everything he said, except when he said that he suggested that American officials are being dishonest when they say that there's a difference between PKK, Kandil, and YPG. That's true of some, but it's not true of a lot of them. And I have spoken with them. They have convinced themselves that in the creation of the SDF, they created an organization that's related to PKK, but it has a lot of tension, and that there's really a difference of interest because the YPG is made up of people who live on the ground in Syria, and they are concerned about their homes and concerned about all the threats to them. I think that is an unwise position. For all the reasons that you guys mentioned, I'm in complete agreement with Luke and with Matt, and that this was a huge mistake from the beginning. Lately I've been saying, it's worse than a crime; it's a blunder. Just forget about morality completely. Not that I think morality is unimportant, but you have an American ally of 70 years with 83 million people. And you're gonna align yourself, and you're gonna say it's temporary, tactical, and transactional. This alignment with an organization that is destined to alienate your ally of 83 million. It's just dumb beyond belief. Having said that, there's the American decision to do it is not primarily wrapped up with feelings about Turkey. There are some in there, and there are some that have. There are groups that have a hostile Turkish agenda who are now working to preserve the relationship now that it's established. But there's a lot of strange American psychology that went into the YPG. I won't go into all of it right now. It'd be interesting to talk about it in greater detail at some other point. Let me just make a couple points and then I'll stop. One is Brett McGurk. Who is Brett McGurk, and why did Brett McGurk is one of the primary architects of this relationship. And he's one of the people who knew exactly what he was doing. But what was he doing? Where did he come from and why did he do it? I worked with Brett McGurk in the Bush administration when he was in the Iraq office. He has always been, since 2006, he's been in favor of an alignment with Iran. And from the point of view of the architect, the United States went in with the YPG, with the PKK, because it wanted to send a message to Tehran and to Moscow that it was going to destroy the Islamic State without threatening Assad. It was part of that. Now, this is an intra-American thing. Obama couldn't say to Congress and to the American people what he was doing, that he was actually recognizing Syria as a Russian and Iranian sphere of interest. So they dressed it up as the SDF. and in dressing it up as the SDF, that also made Americans feel better, because the Democratic Party feels very guilty about all the people that were slaughtered in Syria. You know, Tony Blinken made a famous statement where he said, you know, I have to live with that. I have to live with that. I really have to do some soul searching about all those people that died on our watch. I don't know how much soul searching he's doing, but the fact that he had to say that shows you that there's a sense of guilt. So they feel very good about their relationship with the Syrian Democratic Forces, because it makes them feel like they did something positive in what is otherwise a real blight on the American record. None of that has anything to do with Turkey. It's all intra-American, feelings. But what I would like to see with the Turks is a greater awareness of the coalitions around this issue. In particular, let me give you just one. I could talk about more, but Israel. And Israel, there's Israel in Jerusalem, and then there are pro-Israel elements in Washington. There are lots of pro-Israel elements in Washington that are supportive of the US-YPG relationship for two reasons. Number one, they think it's the key to blocking the land corridor from Tehran to Beirut. Number two, they see it as a way of putting pressure on Turkey because of Turkey's relationship with Hamas. So I think now with this inclination of the Turks to go into Sinjar, that there's an opportunity here for the Turks to actually lessen some of the Israeli and pro-Israeli, I make a distinction, Israeli and pro-Israeli support for the US-YPG relationship. Because if the Turks block the Iranian land corridor through Iraq, they can then go to the Israelis and say, look, the Israelis, we all know they're militarily active out in the east of Syria, primarily to stop the Iranians from moving across. There's a shared interest there. And then also you can come to Washington and say to the pro-Israelis, look what we're doing. We're blocking the Iranian land corridor. But at the same time, unless the Turks distance themselves from Hamas, I don't think that's going to be heard. But I think there's a position here that would, I think, significantly lessen the public support in Washington for the YPG US relationship if the Turks would engage in some creative diplomacy on this while they're engaged in their military activities. We're in a situation right now where if the Turks swat a fly, everyone in Washington says, oh, authoritarianism, Islamism, unilateralism, ally of Russia. I think you have to start looking for the coalitions that you can find who will stand up and say, hey, actually, it's more complex than that. I'll stop there.
Yes.
Kutay Bey, your microphone.
Burak, körle yatan şaşı kalkar oldu. Yeah, thank you. But you know that approximately two hours now we come. So I give you the last sentences and begin with Yusuf Erim. But you know that if you want to speak on this issue, the PKK, PYD, YPG, we need more days, not times, more days on it. So Yusuf, please give the last statements. What do you think? How you draw the future of Turkish-American relations? Okay, in the future.
YPG issue. First of all, I totally agree with Mike on engaging Israel to help improve the US relationship with the US as well. This is something that me and Mike have talked about before. I think that the Turkey-Israel bilateral relationship has more converging and shared interests than any other country in the region, any other duo in the region. And I'm still shocked that these two countries have not reconciled, that they don't have ambassadors at each other's capitals. That being said, when we look at the YPG issue, everyone is obviously in Turkey is concerned, but if we look over the past 6 years, we have to remember just 6 years ago, there was the trench wars, the Hendek wars, and southeastern Turkey was ablaze. In the last 6 years, despite this support for the YPG, Turkey has been able to take the war on terror outside of its borders now. So it has effectively pushed the PKK out. Now it's countering the PKK either in northern Iraq or Syria. So this alone is a huge success for Turkey. I think one of the most important things, especially about US engagement in Syria, a phrase that has disappeared from the US State Department's readouts is respect for Syria's territorial integrity. And frankly, that concerns me greatly, not seeing that statement anymore, not seeing that line inside any of the readouts coming out of the US State Department. It's been a very long time since I've seen a US readout say respecting or protecting Syria's territorial integrity. So I think that needs to find its way back into US rhetoric to ease the concerns of the Turks. Now, when it comes to the YPG, I think Turkey understands now that it has to solve its problem by itself, and it's trying to find ways to work around Washington to actually solve the problem. One of those, obviously, the operation in Gara, and more importantly, the most likely upcoming operation in Sinjar. That would effectively cut off the land bridge between Iraq and Syria. So Turkey's already trying to create alternative solutions to at least meet some of its national security concerns, because it knows it's not going to get what it needs from the United States. Also, Turkey's been pressuring the Russians to try to exert pressure on the YPG to join the regime. Now, that may be something that Washington may not like, but from a Turkish perspective, it would solve some of Turkey's national security issues regarding the YPG as well, having it diluted under a Syrian force. And also, a new dynamic right now is coming into the region. I think this is something that if we had this panel a year from now, we would probably mainly be discussing this issue, the return of the JCPOA, what it's going to do for the region, and what it's going to do, especially the Shiite militia factor in this area. Obviously, we've seen the relationship between Turkey and Iran deteriorate lately. We just saw Zarif and Çavuşoğlu together a couple of weeks ago. Even when they were together, they talked about the lack of communication between the two countries. So while they were trying to put forth some type of problem-solving solution partner facade, you could see that that the level of communications is nowhere where it used to be. And I think the JCPOA, even though Turkey is supporting this rhetorically, I think it's definitely something that is concerning in national security circles in Ankara. The last thing Turkey wants to see is these Shiite militia supercharging themselves. We've already seen comments coming from Kataeb Hezbollah and Hasht al-Shabi that they're going to support the PKK. They're trying to absorb PKK into popular mobilization force ranks inside Iraq. And I think this is a major security concern that is just the threat perception is just starting to change in Ankara right now. Now, I wish if Trump was here, this problem would have been very easily solved because it would have worked very well into his maximum pressure campaign. But now we're seeing a totally different approach to Iran with the Biden administration. So that's going to be another problem.
Okay. Okay. Look, please draw the future of U.S.-American relations. What you think about that? But please, one minute, okay?
Okay. The future of the relationship, regardless of what happens today, tomorrow, the United States is slowly leaving this region. We saw it with America first. It's going to continue a pivot to Asia. The United States has a finite amount of resources. It has to allocate those resources to more pressing national security concerns. At the end of the day, the U.S. needs an ally who can change realities on the ground when it needs to, who has important diplomatic outreach, a Sunni power, most preferably in this region, and nobody fits this profile better than Turkey. So while there's problems on the short-term agenda, the long-term, 5, 10, 15 years, this relationship with Turkey has to be part of a state policy with the United States, because there is no other actor that can fulfill the United States' strategic needs in this region. So important for the short term, minimum damage control right now under Biden and Erdogan. Try to compartmentalize these problems, work on Idlib, work on migrant flows, work on Black Sea cooperation, work on Libya, work on Central Asia. These are areas where Biden and Erdogan can see eye to eye. Work on that and try to make these other situations tolerable at least.
Okay. Mr. Lukofi, the same question for you. Please, the role, the future of Turkish-American relations in the future.
Well, we've had good security relations and good bilateral relations since the early 1950s and for over 70 years. And I think that we will have a good relationship 70 years into the future. I just think it takes both sides having a better understanding on what drives each other, and both sides willing to compromise a little bit. But I think the relationship is too important for it to matter who is the president of Turkey and who is the president of the United States at the time. That it's more about the institutional relationships that we have based over years of cooperation. So I'm cautiously optimistic that going into the future, the relationship will continue to be there.
Thank you very much, Ali. And what do you think about the? You need to open the microphone, please.
Okay. So briefly, I agree with Luke. I also cautiously optimistic on the Turkey-US relationship, but it's dialogue, and rebuild the trust. So hopefully both sides have a more sincere communication and open dialogue on the problems. Otherwise, as I said, other groups, Russia and Iran also, will take more advantage in the region and will be more happier when they see the tension between Turkey and United States. And I think the NATO leadership should also be a mediator at some point and help on some specific issues that we discussed. But again, dialogue and rebuild the trust are the most important right now action items that both sides should do better.
Okay. Michael?
There was a famous Palestinian novel called The Pes Optimist. So I'm cautiously pessimistic. I think that that U.S.-Turkish relations are going to be rocky and bumpy, and I think, but at the same time, I think that for a whole host of practical reasons, we are stuck with each other. However, I keep seeing people on Twitter, Turks keep saying, the U.S. is no longer Turkey's ally. And I keep hearing Americans say, Turkey is no longer the U.S. ally. But the shared interests and the complexity of the relationship is such that it's really like family members who don't like each other. I think we're going to be stuck with each other whether we like it or not. So in that context, I think that there's room for a lot of improvement, but it's going to take a lot of effort because there's so much tension now baked into the relationship that if we don't take care to improve it, it can deteriorate very easily.
Burak, please briefly.
Demirel is the one who educated me. How can I be brief? It takes me how far to say hello?
Please so briefly, please.
Hocam, Istanbul Aydın University is organizing this event today from Istanbul, Washington, New York, from different parts of the world. Distinguished participants are here and talking about Turkish-American relations. One day, if you ask me, how do you describe the relations? I say, classic. This is a classic thing. Rough, resilient, and robust. right? The description of Turkish-American relations. It will still be like that. Yes, the common enemy that brought us in 1950s, the common interest is not around anymore. But the world is changing, we are changing. And as long as people are still talking about, like today, Turkish-American relations, it is gonna be there. It is gonna be rocky, as Michael said. It is gonna be rough, it's gonna be robust, it's gonna be resilient, but it's always gonna be there. And hopefully it will be better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Burak. And the last sentences from Ambassador Matthew Birza, please, Birza, briefly, but
it's hard to add anything. Everyone said so much wisdom here. Ultimately, I agree with everything that it's a bumpy road, as I said in the beginning, but ultimately, I think Joseph Biden and Antony Blinken are totally familiar with Turkey and its strategic importance. And after we get through these first months, things will come together as long as the two sides don't overplay their hands. So otherwise, all I want to say is just thank you so much to Istanbul Aydın University, to you, Kutay, and to Professor Aydın as well for bringing us all together. Thank you.
Okay, really, I again would like to express my gratitude to our president, Mr. Mustafa Aydın, for providing us with these opportunities. And also, again, I would like to thank the Diplomacy Research Association for the contribution to this organization, and all of you, all our participants, thank you very much. And also Bilgehan, also again, thank to Bilgehan to his effort for organizing this organization. Again, thank you very much for everybody. Hope to see you in Turkey also, especially after this pandemic. Maybe we organize not webinar, a conference on Turkish-American relations at our university in Turkey, and communicate directly, not by using the computers. Okay, take care of yourself, please.
Also, thank you very much, Kutay Hocam. Also, all the it is a very fruitful conference and this seminar. I continue from the beginning to end. It is very, very fruitful. I want to all the speakers to again. Also, after Corona, what you as you say, we wait them to Turkey a short time, inshallah.
İnşallah, evet.
Teşekkür ediyorum.
Teşekkürler başkanım. Sağ olun.
Teşekkür ediyorum. Hayırlı akşamlar diliyorum.
Sağ olun.
Teşekkür ediyorum. Sağ olun.
Thank you.